Hi guys, how are you all today evening? Good evening. Today we shall talk about one verse from Bhagavad Gita that Lord Krishna told Arjuna while they were discussing about life in the Kurukshetra war field. Lord Krishna told Arjuna, "You are your only friend and you are your only enemy. It is for you to decide whether you want to be your friend or your enemy." Though this verse looks very simple from the outside, it is actually quite complicated. Complicated materialistically and not spiritually. You are your only friend. That means that you will become your best friend only when you follow some footsteps. You are your only enemy. That means that you will remain an enemy of yourself as long as you don't follow those footsteps. There are three types of ego as we have already discussed. The first one, where an individual entity, whether male or female, identifies himself or herself with this mind body complex which is material, then that living entity or that particular individual is following what is known as false ego. This living entity feels that he or she is just this gross body. That is false ego. When he or she does so, he or she becomes his or her enemy, because in that case he or she listens only to this gross and etheric body, the senses and the mind, the intelligence, etc., and not the vibrations from far beyond. Because he or she is listening only to these vibrations, hence he or she is responsible for his or her actions in this material world. When the same living entity identifies himself or herself with the soul that has taken birth in this gross body in this birth, then that type of ego is called the actual ego. When a person identifies with the soul within, he or she listens to the vibrations from the soul to the gross body, and hence he or she can also recognize his or her past karma and destiny and live life according to the unconscious, subconscious, and conscious memories of his or her destiny, where the unconscious memories are the ones which have been recorded by the soul for the living entity from his or her past births. In that case, this person will not repeat the mistakes or errors he or she had done in his or her past birth. This is partly material and partly spiritual. Identifying oneself with his or her soul, is partly material and partly spiritual. In that case, the living entity is partly friendly and partly inimical to himself or herself. Yes, the tendency to repeat mistakes will not be there in this case, but yet the person has not reached the place of or the spot of super ego. The super ego is the one where a living entity identifies himself and herself as a spark in the eternal flame that is a part of the super soul. In that case, this living entity automatically becomes a friend of himself or herself because once he or she identifies himself or herself as a part of the super soul, this person begins acting according to the vibrations and messages coming from the super soul and the soul to the gross body. In this case, there are no likelihoods of making silly mistakes because God will never give a wrong advice. Whatever the living entity does when he or she identifies himself or herself as a part and parcel of the super soul will always be correct and godly and spiritual. It will all his or her actions will be divine in nature. This will help him or her to ultimately seek self realization, deliverance, liberation, and identifying himself or herself as a part of Brahman and thus automatically or at last succeeding in going back to the super soul as a part of the eternal flame. Kindly let me know what you think of my talk about this particular verse. If you feel that I am talking sense, kindly subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon so that I can keep informing you about my future videos. Please pardon me for my mistakes or errors in my appearance, diction, spelling, grammar, etc. Because when I am talking to you about such important matters like the one that I have talked to you today, I tend to distract myself from frivolous things. Till we meet in my next video, it is good evening from TSV Raghavan.